welcome everyone to this edition of the seminar series, the last one for the year, and what a interesting year it's been. We've got a double act today. So my name's Liam Watherspoon, University of Auckland, one of the associate directors of QuakeCoRE. If you don't know me, the pleasure of introducing the double act today with Tom and Daniel, who are going to introduce the Aotearoa Earthquake Science Advisory Panel. So Tom, for those of you who aren't aware, is fairly well known to us within the Te Rāngahu QuakeCoRE circles as the Chief Science Advisor for NEMA. And then in his spare time, he's a professor at UC in disaster risks and resilience. So really great to have Tom on board. And then alongside Tom, we have Daniel, who is probably also well known to quite a few of you online, but Daniel's a senior advisor at NEMA and the hazards risk management team. And he's a member of a number of the different science advisory panels that have been spun up. Some have been around for a while, some have just started up, and hence the two of them today are going to chat around the earthquake focus one. So over to the both of you. Thanks again.
Kia ora, Liam. Thank you so much, and kia ora, everybody. Great to see you here on a Friday morning. As Liam said, my name's Tom Wilson. It's a real pleasure to be here presenting with you today. So Daniel and I, we're going to be a double act as we go through it. You'll probably hear a little bit more from me, but Daniel's going to come in on a few of the key points, and he's got a wonderful knack of intercepting when I'm saying something silly, incorrect, or incoherent. So when he sparks up, always worth listening. Daniel, did you want to say anything just as we kick off?
Good morning, all. Yep. So just as introduced, Daniel Hill, and yeah, that's in the hazard risk management team on a couple of the science panels, and I also lead the science desk in a national response, which we'll get to a little bit later. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Daniel. So the way that we thought we'd approach this today, the main objective is we're thrilled to be sharing and publicising the Aotearoa Earthquake Science Advisory Panel. In a nutshell, what we use the panel for is to formalise the connection between the science system and the emergency management system for science advice particularly during crisis or during response periods. But as we'll go through, the panels have a few other roles that they have as well. It's also an opportunity to look at that interface between the science and research system and the emergency management system, and how the different bits fit together. And in particular, what are some of the structures, networks, and respectful expectations that we have for engaging in that space. And I guess the thing I really wanted to start out with is just to say a huge thank you to this community, as one that's always incredibly engaged and very active during any emergency response, particularly relating to earthquakes. But many of you were also involved with Cyclone Gabrielle and various other disasters over the last decade. So without further ado, we'll steam into it, and the hope is that we'll have quite a bit of time for discussion at the end, and very keen for anyone to get stuck into it. If I can get my computer to work. There we go. Right, we thought we might start off with a karakia just to open. So feel free to join along if you like at home, or however you so choose. And apologies in advance for my truly shocking throw. Mori oho, mori tau, mori aora, kia tatou katoa, humie, huie, tai kie. So awaken the spirit, engage the spirit of life amongst us, and be united in purpose. And before we get underway, I was given the instructions that we're the bookend for the year of the monthly seminar series for QuakeCoRE, and it looks like there's a fantastic start to the new year in 2025 with Rū Whenua giving what looks like a superb presentation on improving public behaviour during earthquake shaking. So look out for that in the new year. So what we wanted to just, I guess, to set the scene a little bit of how NEMA works and how this whole science advisory panel landscape fits together is the role of NEMA is as the national agency for the emergency management system. So in sort of crude terms, we've got three main roles. One is operator. So we're meant to be operators as operate the national warning system, for example, and we'll stand up the National Crisis Coordination Centre or National Crisis Management Centre, depending what your flavour is. I'm just waiting for Daniel to jump in and correct me here. But we also have a stewardship role, which is to try and progress and ensure that the emergency management systems is healthy and progressing as much as it can. And also the assurer role, where we provide an assurance function for the system. And it'd be fair to say we've with the resourcing that's been available and the priorities set, operator and steward has been the main focus, but assurer is certainly coming along as well soon. But in this context, one of the priorities we have is the formalisation of the connection between the science system and the emergency management system. The science system is a really important part of the emergency management system, where the use of science, and I mean the term science in the most inclusive and multidisciplinary sense that you can imagine. And I guess really also where appropriate, mātauranga and other knowledge systems also feed in there as well. But I'm being lazy and using the term science as the main, but not necessarily the most important knowledge system that we use. But the use of science advice into the emergency management system is critical. Everything from operational forecasts all the way through to long-term risk reduction policy and longer-term resilience dimensions. But one of the things that's been well acknowledged both domestically here and internationally over many decades is there's a need to coordinate and often translate the science advice so that it's fit for purpose. And often, particularly in a crisis, there's a need for very particular and appropriate science advice to be used rapidly and often with very substantive consequences or gravity on the decision that's being made or being informed by the science advice. So there's one of the ways that we've, I guess, put a bit of a metaphor around this is this little cartoon that we sort of cooked up a year or two ago, where you can sort of start out with the data or maybe the raw knowledge, and then it might be value-add products that get produced, such as, an example that comes to mind for me would be volcano alert bulletins out of GeoNet, or it might be formal some of the GeoNet products around that's occurred if we've got shaking, like an aftershock forecast, for example, or even some of the social science products that come through as well. But what we've certainly found is it's that next step of despite often best intentions and best aspirations and even considerable preparation and planning, those value-add products sometimes don't quite meet the exact need that we might have in an operational sense for the emergency management context. So having someone that's able to, or some people that can translate that material into something that's actionable advice is quite helpful. And we sort of see the hazard risk management team inside NEMA as part of that, but we very much see our science advisory panels in that role as well, where we're looking to get leading experts to provide authoritative knowledge, and particularly individuals that are well trusted and well versed in the system or the emergency management context that can provide that advice. And so in recent times, we've used various forms of science panels and science experts in major operational undertakings, such as the Whakaari eruption in 2019, where we had the New Zealand Volcano Science Advisory Panel stand up. Cyclone Gabrielle, we used a variety of different experts in different formats. And one of the lesser known ones, perhaps, but what that was really critical was the 2022 Taupō unrest from the volcano there, where there was some quite heavy duty science advice needed. So NEMA's set up a suite of panels, and we've got more underway coming. But the purpose of these science advisory panels is to ensure that we've got this high quality, well communicated, and consistent science advice to the emergency management system. Under the legislation and our various sort of secondary legislation pieces, like the National Civil Defence Emergency Management Plan, it sets us up where we have huge flexibility of who and how we take science advice from pretty much anyone. But what we very much would like to do is set up those structures in advance of a crisis, so that we've got those networks and structures in place. There's also an expectation on the panels that they are coordinating the monitoring and scientific investigations and the data collection, I guess sort of at a strategic level, where the opportunity there to ensure that we've got a well-coordinated science system and response to different events is very important. And they can also act as a focal point at a national level for international science liaison. So one of the examples I can think of would be with the Kaikoura earthquake and the Canterbury earthquake sequence, which is increasingly long ago now. It's huge international science interest, and that can create a bit of a burden, particularly for operational agencies with well-meaning but perhaps slightly disconnected scientists and researchers coming in to offer advice or support, but needing a bit of coordination there and how that might get managed. Particularly important in the social sciences, where there's an interface with communities and so on. Some ethical risks there that our social science community often manages very effectively on behalf of us all. And just so that I'm being really clear there, it's physical science, natural science engineers, and social scientists and beyond all can cause ethical risks there. So just want to make that clear. The science panels, they're managed by the hazard risk management team inside NEMA, and it's on behalf of the Director of Civil Defence Emergency Management. So that's what sort of gives it the authorising environment, and that's directly from the legislation and also from the secondary leg, as we call it, or as I've discovered is called, which is the National Civil Defence Emergency Management Plan. We've had the Volcano Science Advisory Panel, which has been up since about 2012. It sort of formed around about the Tamari eruption in 2012. And it was a lot of the emphasis for this was coming out of a lot of experience overseas, where volcanologists at a national level needed, or there are a lot of lessons that there was a need to coordinate and bring some of those communities together. And it's been very enduring. And as listed there's been a number of operational dimensions to it. We should actually add that we've activated or went into standby mode in 2024 with the Whakaari eruptions. But we've also used it for a number of BAU or business as usual activities as well, which various risk assessments and other matters of the day, which has been extremely helpful. I think it really shone during the Whakaari eruption in 2019 with the science advice response there. It was very effective in coordinating and managing in that very challenging period. Based on the success of the volcano panel, an earthquake panel was considered important to stand up. And my understanding is that in early 2021, that there was moves to begin to form that. And it's taken a while due to various reasons, but I'm very proud to say that as of this year, we've stood the panel up formally. And sorry, that slide is a little bit dated. I should say that we are operational now, post exercise Rū Whenua back in June. So the current panels that we've got underway at the moment is the volcano panel and the earthquake panel. And then we have a suite of different tsunami groups and panels that are also available to NEMA with various, it's in a slightly different context, but it's a story for another day. And we also connect into the National Landslide Advisory Panel, which is a more of a research-led, as I understand it, panel, but it's a very useful and important coordination mechanism, if you like. And so we've got formal links from the earthquake panel and the future severe weather panel should connect into that as well. And it was used to good effect during the North Island severe weather events last year. And then as I said, we're standing up a severe weather panel, which is one of the lessons that we took out of Cyclone Gabrielle in particular. It'll be a slightly more strategic panel, I suspect, but again, it's probably a story for another day, but just giving a signal that that's coming. And then very likely that we'll stand up a space weather panel as well, which maybe have more of a operational lens to it. But again, that's with particularly the May space weather events of this year, it really highlighted the need for coordinated science advice and bringing that into the emergency management system. Some of the things that we're very keen on looking at it's been on the cards to look at for the last couple of years, but we just haven't sadly had to be frank, headspace or time to really get into it, has been looking at a Māori, either science or maybe mātauranga. I'm not quite sure. I would pretend what's the most appropriate way to frame it, but certainly a Māori panel of looking to strengthen that area, and also social science perhaps as a cross-cutting entity. At the moment, our social science is embedded within each of the sort of phenomena-based or hazard-based panels. But yeah, certainly very keen to keep considering how that might look. And then one of the other things that's sort of in the offing is a more high-level panel supporting the National Hazards Board as part of the national risk approach. But again, that's probably a story for another day. Just to put this into context, sorry, I'm on my little laptop screen here, and I've got Zoom paraphernalia all over the screen, so I can't quite read exactly what's there. But so just forgive me as I maneuver things around. But perhaps the way to kind of think of how these all fit together is on the left panel here with life safety advice for warnings. We have a very rapid system that forms where GeoNet, operated by GNS Science, and the Met Service, they provide very fast warnings or perhaps better information, but sort of monitoring information, certainly out of GeoNet. And that's a form of science advice that comes into NEMA's MA, or our Monitoring, Assessment and Reporting Centre. Have I got that right, Daniel?
Almost. Alerting and reporting.
Yeah, I always get that wrong. My apologies to any MA staff that are here. But so that's a 24/7 and very rapid facility. So the term that I love people telling me is, it's eyes on glass 24/7. And the idea is that it's meant to speed up and ensure a more reliable and robust warning system. It was stood up particularly after the Kaikoura earthquake and some of the investment that went in with wanting faster or more timely tsunami warnings. But we've strongly benefited from that across severe weather and various other elements, and they provide a wonderful service. But it's very procedural, and it's very fast, very rapid, and usually quite formulaic given the nature of what they're trying to achieve. So one of the things that we, as a complementary centre, is these science advisory panels, where we use the panels as part of, but not exclusively, but as part of that interface between the science system and the emergency management system. So there's that focus there on the sort of sector coordination to generate the best possible advice. Often the advice that we're asking is in a slower time frame, and often much more complex and nuanced and challenging, to be honest. We're very grateful to the panel members. They volunteer their time. We don't pay people to be on those panels. So we're very, very grateful for the institutional support which is provided there. And it's really operated under a best efforts, best endeavours approach. And certainly the responsibility still sits with NEMA staff around how that advice comes in, but we've found them to be extremely effective and successful. And then over on the right-hand side here is how we operationalise this in a major response. And so at the national level, we have the NCMC, or the National Crisis Management Centre, which is the conceptual, metaphorical and physical way that we bring everything together for managing major events. And so what we use there is we have stood up a science desk function within the NCMC, which coordinates a lot of the panels, our science agency liaisons, or LOs I think I saw Rob Langridge on the call here. I think he's operated as one of them every now and then. and a science governance function, and so on. And so that coordinates all that science advice and tasking back out to the science system with the emergency management system. And again, that was a lesson coming out of Cyclone Gabrielle, where we just did not have that set up well, and there was a lot of lost opportunity to better coordinate and better leverage the science system in that regard. So that's kind of how the whole thing, we attempt to fit it together. The Aotearoa Earthquake Science Advisory Panel itself, the role of the panel is there to ensure the provision of authoritative and efficient readiness, reduction, response, and recovery science advice. But I'll just be really frank, we're really focused in on the response. So we're really looking at during a major crisis, or if there's been a large earthquake or something complicated happening with respect to seismic activity, that's what we're looking for as our one of our strands of looking for science advice. It doesn't replace GNS or GeoNet in their capability or capacities, nor other connections, whether formal or informal, but we do find it to be a really useful way to consolidate and coordinate and use it as a way to sort of formalize our connection with the science system, so to speak. We'll take you through the panel and what it looks like in a minute, but we tend to only activate it for significant or really complex events. So, I think the volcano panel's probably activated in anger, maybe about 6 or 7 times in the last 12 or so years. So just to give you a sense of what that cadence is like. So it'll be interesting to see how often the earthquake panel stands up. Hopefully never, because it'll mean that nothing bad's happened. But not nice to know that it's there, I guess. Just to unpack those panel objectives a bit more as I maneuver Zoom paraphernalia around my screen. The panel is designed to operate as a network of networks. And so the intent is that it's really accessing expertise and capacity from across the whole science system. And again, that's meant very inclusively. And as I've sort of stressed, I guess, and conscious I'm kind of getting jammed on repeat here, but it really acts as that focal point for the emergency management system to engage with specific issues or address issues where coordinated science advice is required. So it can be used in all sorts of manners, but perhaps the one that comes to mind the most is really delivery of advice. But we also have an expectation of the panel that there's some system coordination that occurs with it. So we have a number of research leaders or program leaders that sit on there, and including from GNS Science, the Natural Hazards Resilience Platform, QuakeCoRE, et cetera, and certainly a strong expectation that those panel members lead in an event. And so there's some responsibility attached there. We've talked about system connections and also contributing to risk management priorities. I think what we're meaning by that is going beyond just response. Is risk. Sometimes we'll draw on the panels for risk reduction, recovery, and readiness activities too. And then there's an international dimension as well. And perhaps a good example to give is when the Tongan volcano, or the Hunga eruption from 2020, when was that? 2021, 2022? 2022. When that erupted, we actually activated the VSAP, or the volcano panel, both as a good dry run for a New Zealand response, but also to provide support to Tonga, which was I think quite successful in the end. Representation on the panel. I had a peculiar circumstance in my role where, when I was appointed as Chief Science Advisor, I sort of inherited the panel. So a lot of the decisions around who was on it and how it was structured had already been made. We've made a few tweaks, but we've largely run with what the establishment group set up. But there's representation across most of the usual suspects. It's chaired by the Chief Science Advisor, so usually myself or Daniel if I'm not available, or we've got a few alternates that would float in there. And so obviously GNS, but also Natural Hazards Commission have a formal position on there, as does MB with their building performance team and those connections across to various national research programs and some of the operational or professional bodies, I guess, would be the best way to describe it. This panel's structured in terms of subgroups. So there's a long list of subgroups here of reflecting the various expertise that was felt to be important to provide that capability and capacity. Starting at the top there with earthquake science, and with Te Ao Māori capability within there as well, and social science and so on. So the idea is that it's got a broad coverage. And the one time that we've used it so far has been with exercise Rū Whenua, which was the national emergency management exercise back in June and July. And we were sort of building the panel up to be operational by that point, which it did seem to work fairly well in that event, but we haven't had a real world test of it yet. So, and in many ways, I hope we never do. But again, like I said before, useful that we've got that capability there. I just wanted to add in here, and I always remember, I'm not sure whether John Hopkins is on the call, but I'm sure, I feel like he's always on my shoulder, which is in a good way. But I'm also really conscious of giving that authorising environment is for these types of panels, and particularly giving clarity as to what their utility is and what their role and responsibility is. And particularly science and response, the authorising environment is very much from the National CDEM Plan Order 2015, where we've got explicit statutory mechanisms for how we go about gaining science advice in a response. And I just wanted to flag that as something that's really important for, if it gives us structure, gives us a good sense of which way, what the focus and priority should be, and how we go about doing that. And just some examples here of some agencies are actually written into that plan order of what we're expecting from them. And in the next couple of years, we'll be updating the national plan. So again, a great chance for many of you to engage in that process.
About 5 minutes, Tom.
Oh, thanks, Liam. Cheers. I'll just skip through a few of these. One of the areas that I wanted to home in on a little bit is how we formalise some of that science advice in a major event. There's a lot of advice that will be used for sort of on-the-ground operational dimensions, but we also use the science advice for informing the ODESC system or the chief executives and up into the Prime Minister for major events. And this is it's an absolute lolly scramble of a diagram, but hopefully what I was just trying to communicate here is how those science advisory panels help to fit into that system and their very important role with the formal connection into advising NEMA and particularly the National Crisis Management Centre and the National Controller and so on, and just where they sort of fit in that wider ecosystem. As I said before, we stood up the panel operationally within the Rū Whenua exercise, which was an alpine fault scenario. And again, just trying to address that challenge that we know is there of really trying to formalise those science roles within the emergency management system, at the very least during a major crisis response. And certainly some of the high-level reflections it was very valuable to have everyone there laying out what those roles, responsibilities, structures and networks are, but certainly training would be quite valuable for scientists, especially increasing understanding around what the incident management system approach would be. There was a lot of reassurance provided by having a more formalised science coordination approach. That certainly was well noted, especially by the National Controller. But geospatial and wider situational awareness of being able to ingest science products, especially geospatially, into the emergency management system was a real challenge, and something to be very mindful of as we go forward. So at that point, quite keen to finish off there. My apologies, Daniel, I've managed to blather right through that, but hopefully you can take point on any curly questions. And thank you so much for your time, and really keen to take any questions and any discussions at this point. Got it.
Well, I'll just add on the end there. Thanks for that, Tom. So yeah, obviously we ran out of time a little bit there, but if you do want to talk to me further around the Earthquake Science Advisory Panel or the Science Desk in particular, I'll be at the Geosciences Conference in a couple of weeks' time, so seek me out there.